COVID-19 vaccines are back in the news once again, and the timetable of administering the doses. To talk more about this in detail is Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, joining me once again from Ontario. Brian, both BC and Alberta say they'll move the time between doses from a 3 to 4 week interval to a 16-week interval. Why the change, and is there any real science to back this up?
Well, there's an argument about whether the science is there to back it up, but Dr. Bonnie Henry, BC's provincial medical officer, came out on Monday saying, look, we need to do this so that we can get more people vaccinated, that there is a miraculous amount of coverage with just one shot. And if we do this, then every adult that wants a shot in British Columbia can get one by sometime in July. And especially with more vaccines coming on, Johnson & Johnson probably in the next few weeks, we'll talk about AstraZeneca in a moment, then maybe even by Canada Day, every adult could be in British Columbia could be vaccinated. Well, Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro, he took a look at this and he said, yep, we are interested as well. Ontario is saying we're going in this direction. So, and Saskatchewan as well. So I think what essentially is happening though, and I hate to put it this way, Hal, is it is in some ways the equivalent of people cutting their pills in half because they don't have enough money for their medication. The only reason that they're doing this is that we don't have enough doses. This came at the same time as the United States was saying, every American that wants a vaccine, we're going to have one for you by May. And we're saying if we go down to just one dose, we can get this done by July, with the rest of the doses, your second dose, your follow-up dose, being done between then and the end of September. So it wouldn't change the overall timeline, but it would give us some level of protection for the majority of the adult population by summer.
So AstraZeneca doses, or the Indian-made version of it known as Covishield, are now in Canada, but you've discovered some odd things about these doses. Can you share?
A couple of things. One, where they came from, how we got them. They came from a place called the Serum Institute of India. Now, this is a massive vaccine manufacturing facility in India, and India is one of the world's leading vaccine manufacturing facilities. But this particular assembly line or manufacturing line, production line to put vaccines into bottles was set up with hundreds of millions of donor dollars from governments around the world, from places like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in order to supply low-cost doses to low and middle-income countries. Canada is not a low and middle-income country, so we approved AstraZeneca, but at the same time approved Covishield. Health Canada treats them as two distinct vaccines, even though they describe it as the same recipe made in two different kitchens. We are essentially, as one person put it to me this week, one longtime health bureaucrat now working at the international level, they said, this move makes Canada a vaccine pirate. And now the latest information that we found out about these doses kind of adds to that. We may have intercepted them on the high seas. These might be the doses that were meant for South Africa that country rejected and said, we're sending back the ones you've given us, and that 500,000 dose order that we had for you, we don't want it anymore. 300,000 or 60% of the doses that we got this week, Hal, they have an April 2nd expiry date. This is like buying milk just before it goes bad. Now, the good news is the provinces tell me, yes, we can get into arms, but there's going to be a big back and forth because there's a fight over who should get this AstraZeneca vaccine and who shouldn't. What age group is it appropriate for, and so on.
Yeah, there's some debate about if the vaccine is safe for people over the age of 65. What are the health experts saying?
Well, look, I think it is. I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, but I think it is safe for people over 65. The National Vaccine Council, National Committee on Immunization, they came out and said there's not enough evidence of people over the age 65 being in the clinical trials to say that it's effective for them. They didn't say it's not effective for people over the age of 65. They said there were not enough people over the age of 65 in the initial clinical trials. But this vaccine has been used since the end of December across Great Britain. It's been used in India. It's been used in Mexico, Dominican Republic, elsewhere, with great success. And to give you an idea, the government in Scotland commissioned a study, and they have mostly been using AstraZeneca for people over the age of 65. People like my Uncle Joe, my Aunt Margaret, my Uncle Frank, they've all been getting this dose. After 4 weeks of a single shot dose, so this is without the follow-up booster shot, hospitalizations in those over 65 went down by 94%, deaths by 100%. That's what I'm looking for in a vaccine. Stops you from dying. Make sure that most people are not going to end up in hospital. I would say that the real world data trumps any worries that people have about the clinical trial data.
Brian, Alberta slowly entered phase 2 of reopening its economy. How's your Tai Chi and your Pilates? Pretty good? You can join me up there.
I don't know what those are. Nothing is open in Toronto at this point.
You know, it's been slow in many provinces across Canada. The economic impact has been devastating to so many small and medium-sized businesses. I talk to business owners all the time. Many of them are probably going to close their doors because they just can't afford to remain closed, like closed permanently. Recent stats say this could be the worst economic year on record since 1961.
1961 is the year that Stats Canada started collecting data in the form that they do. So it's the worst year on record, since they started using the same set of statistics. And the economy shrank by 5.4% of GDP last year. That is a staggering amount. Of course, many of the businesses hurt hardest are, those that employ people who are on the margins. We're talking about hotel workers, restaurant workers, retail, small businesses. These are the places that have been hit hardest. Your local gym where you would go and take Pilates class, for example. Your big banks, they're doing fine. Trucking companies, they're mostly doing fine. Amazon, if you work at an Amazon warehouse, they're doing great. Loblaws, Safeway, Sobeys, they're all fine. But it's the small and medium-sized businesses that are hurting. And I know that your Premier, Jason Kenney, is facing the same kind of backlash every time he tries to loosen restrictions slightly. Look, Texas just announced that they are wide open as of this week. 100% of businesses can open, and the mask mandate is ending. Mississippi following suit. New York State has had indoor dining for restaurants since Valentine's Day. Chicago, since late January, has allowed indoor dining, and each of those states has, or locations, has increased the capacity limit. So I think it started with 25%. It may be up to 50% in the Chicago area now. The United States is starting to open up. That's partly because they're well ahead of us in terms of vaccine. They're over 20%. We're at about 4% of the population with a single shot. But also their politicians saying, yes, there is the health impact, but there's also the economic impact, and we can't ignore that.
Well, and health impact as well, with a lot of the business shutting down, that creates a lot of depression, anxiety, and suicide rates going through the roof. We've talked about experts about that specifically in our show here. Now, Brian, are you still of the opinion that the Trudeau Liberals are looking for an election this spring despite the lockdowns and vaccine rollout problems?
Yes, I really am. And, even more information coming out over the last week or so would lead me to that. One, the AstraZeneca doses arriving miraculously. We agreed to purchase 20 million AstraZeneca doses. You'll notice that they're not on a delivery schedule anytime soon because they're coming from the United States where they won't release the vaccine. So we miraculously find these ones from India that have an expiry date. We're going to get them into people's arms. They're going to hope that the death rate goes down, that the hospitalization rate goes down. They're going to bring in a big budget, and they're already putting out signals. The Liberals complaining in a Canadian press story that was out over the weekend, maybe you saw it, that, those mean Conservatives are blocking our legislative agenda. We can't pass bills because we're in a minority. Let me say that is baloney. Absolute, or to use the Joe Biden term, it's malarkey. This is simply not true. Even in a minority government, the governing party controls the legislative agenda. The most the Conservatives can do is, push for a debate that lasts a few hours.
Well, aren't the NDP also propping them up at the same time?
They are, and none of the demands by the opposition parties are, forcing the government to delay legislation by months or even weeks. We're talking a few hours on a Thursday for a debate on an issue that they feel is important for the country. So the Liberals are trying to set it up so that if those COVID numbers that I described to you do fall, that they are ready to go and look for, election day to be June 7th or 14th.
Are the Conservatives ready to go? They've said in the past that they've, had a lot of money in their coffers thanks to their donors, but are they really ready at this point?
I'm not sure. They've got their convention coming up. There is an attempt by a lot of people aligned with Derek Sloan to try and use the convention to take over the party that threw him out. We'll see if they're successful in that. If they are, expect the Liberals to use that to their advantage. I think Aaron O'Toole will be able to, push back against that, though. And, but he has to get a narrative ready that he's ready and to show that he's got a handle on what's going on in this country when it comes to how the government is failing us on COVID-19. Again, yes, we might end up having all of us get at least one shot by July, but not because of any actions by the Trudeau government. They have continued to fail us, but because doctors and scientists found a way for us to, effectively cut our pills in half. He's got to be able to capitalize on the failures of this government in the pandemic in order to turn things around. But it will be tough against a very big spending budget.
Brian, We Charity is back in the news once again. An American journalist and former prominent donor is calling for a full-scale police investigation. Meanwhile, other charities are really worrying about the trust fallout.
Yeah, this is not the first time that I've heard from charities that they worry that what's going on with We is going to hurt them. There's a company called Proof. They do a lot of public relations, public affairs, government relations work. And they did a tracking study on this a couple of months ago and found that trust in charities was down significantly due to the We Charity scandal. So this is bad news all around for the sector. But my heart breaks for this man, Reid Cowan, who appeared before the Commons Committee last week looking into We and described what happened. He became involved after his 4-year-old son died. He fell at a play park and died as a result of injuries in that. And to help him cope with the loss of his son, he decided he was going to give him a legacy and help build schools in Africa. Everything that's come out about We, and by the way, he went to some of the biggest school districts in America. He spoke, he bundled money, he raised money. They told him that his work, his documentaries brought in some of the big American powerhouse corporations to fund We in the United States. And he has been beside himself finding out what has gone on and that the charity isn't quite what he said. And he described how outraged he was at an article that said staff used to joke that the name plaques that went on schools should go on with Velcro because they changed them so often. He found a video showing that the school his son, one of the schools named after his son, had been named. They'd had naming ceremonies with other high-profile donors, and the videos were online. He wants a full-scale police investigation in the United States and in Canada into how this organization has conducted itself.
Brian, there's a global battle over the future of journalism with media outlets here in Canada. They're saying tech giants like Google and Facebook need to pay up. Now, many newspapers have been struggling in our country, including your newspaper, with a lack of revenue. Now, Brian, your rival, the Toronto Star, has come up with a unique and creative way to raise funds. Tell me a bit about that.
It's kind of like going back to how opera was funded back in past centuries. Opera houses used to be funded by the casinos outside that would give them enough money to be able to put on the beautiful Italian operas that we still know and love to this day. And in some ways, there's a lot of schools and hospitals and other infrastructure across our respective provinces funded by the lottery. So the Toronto Star says they're going to launch an online gaming app. It's an interesting way for them to fund their journalism, but they say, look, we want to keep doing what we're doing. We can't do it the way it is. I'll get to Google and Facebook in a moment, but it's a new way. Now, a lot of people may not realize this, but for years, the Toronto Star was actually funded by those naughty novels that your granny used to read that would be purchased at the supermarket checkout line, the Harlequin romance novels. Wow. Torstar owned Harlequin romance globally, and it was the cash cow for them. It made more money for them than the newspaper did, and it funded a lot of good journalism. I'll say that even though they're my competitors. So in a way, this is just a kind of a return to that. As far as the Google-Facebook fight, there's an ongoing discussion about whether the Trudeau government's going to step in and make the tech giants start paying. For example, if you read a story of mine that I wrote that my employers paid for on your Google News app, there's a chance that you never end up on a site owned by my employer that gives them the revenue, the ad revenue from that, from you viewing it. That money goes to Google, and the news publishers say, wait a minute, this doesn't work out quite the way it should, and you're not sharing. So a big fight going on. They're almost at a deal in Australia with both tech giants. France is legislating. We'll see what Canada does in the coming weeks.
Yeah, we'll keep our eye on that, definitely. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.